Hello, I hope you all can hear me. Let me just double check whether my microphone is working or not. Yeah, okay, it's working, I guess. Okay, so today is going to be session 2 of this course that we're running on Forum CAD. Today's session is, it's going to be split into two parts. So the first part is going to pertain towards being able to edit objects, understanding what um, gradients are, what hatches are, as well as how layer management works within 4MCAD. The part after that will be more towards annotation. How do you write text within your drawings? How do you add dimensions to your drawings? How do you add, a lot of these textual features, multileaders, um, a few of these additional, how do you adjust the annotative scale, and how do you, yeah, make a text annotative as well. Instead of that, sorry, not instead of that, after that, we will also be looking a little bit at the page setup manager, as well as creating a block that we later on use to actually export out drawing. So the idea is that, once you have done a drawing, or once you've come up with a drawing, you don't just want to see it there as a DWG file, right? You want to be able to export it out as a plot or print it onto something. So creating a baseline for that print is important, where maybe you want to have a table where you want to add, the dimension. Um, let's say you create a chair, for example, and you want to be able to, or an office building, you want to mention the dimensions for certain things within that space. So, you're probably going to be doing that via a table within a block on a piece of paper. So all of that final parts that you add to a drawing is what we'll be covering within part 2 of today's session. So, it's going to be a bit long. I'll try to keep it under 2 hours, but no promises. So let's start off. So we are going to be focusing on four things primarily for today. Uh, or I guess for the first session, sorry, for the first part. First of all, it's going to be a small recap, take a few minutes to understand what we did, um, last week in the last session, which also consisted of two parts. Next, we're going to look at how we modify objects. And by this, I mean not just the entities that you create in 4MCAD, so not just blocks or something, but more towards, how functions like trim, extend, scale, offset, move, delete, like all of these functions, or chamfer, fillet, how all of these functions work to actually um, get a job done. So first of all, with regards to, before moving to modifying objects, I guess, let's have a look, or let's discuss a little bit, recap a little bit about what we did last time around. So, the first session consisted of two parts. The first part was more focused towards understanding the UI elements of 4MCAD that 4MCAD offers. So, understanding how the ribbon looks like, what the ribbon is, what a status bar is, what the quick access toolbar is, all of these things, and then kind of playing around with where the settings are, where drawing settings are, where drawing options are, and understanding, sort of getting the feel, getting comfortable with what 4MCAD looks like. Because on the surface, when you just open up the software, it can be quite overwhelming. So we took a few minutes. We took 45 minutes, an hour, kind of really go through everything before we actually start drawing something out. After that, the second part consisted of, as I've mentioned it right now, actually drawing some things out. So these things might be lines, spines, polylines, circles, sphere, not spheres, sorry, we didn't do 3D objects, although we did discuss it. But mostly 2D objects that you can think of rectangles, the basic shapes. And then we brought our focus more towards creating blocks, which is, one of the key focuses of 4M CAD, as well as other CAD tools where, blocks essentially allow you to be able to replicate things. Create a blueprint for one item and then be able to scale it to, or I guess apply it to multiple scenarios. After that, um, we're going to be focusing on this session. This session is more towards object modification. So, tools that we will be using to trim, extend, to maybe add attributes to our blocks. Just the basic one, or I guess going into the block editor as well. The idea is to add different, or the idea is not to add, but rather to be able to modify, a drawing that you've come up with. After that, we are going to be looking into hatching and gradients, how we add hatches, how the hatching scale works, what are the different patterns that we can use, what are the patterns that are given by default, how do we add patterns to the hatching tool, and so on. Layer management, it will essentially curtail, you know, being able to add different layers, being able to freeze or thaw layers, being able to turn layers on and off, discussing the difference between what both of those things mean, what turning off, turning on means versus thawing and sorry, versus freezing and thawing something. So there is a difference between the both. You probably would have noticed it if you've used AutoCAD or 4M or any CAD tool for that matter. Most have a similar functionality. So yeah, I think we can get started with the first topic, which is modifying objects. Okay, so this is an important distinction that we're trying to create. Um, there's multiple ways of selecting objects. By default, we are given, I think by default, when I install the software, um, as I click on an object, let it be a line, polyline, block, whatever, just any sort of object. It gets added to the selection set. I did not like that. I'm used to the kind of I'm used to the kind of scenario where once I click on one item, then I click on the next, it shifts to the selection set entirely shifts to that new item. Because right now my goal is not to create a selection set. Right now it's just to look at maybe some properties of an item or something. I don't want to have to do extra clicks for that. But rather, when I want to build a selection set, I can simply hold down Shift and then click on multiple items, and then that will add those items to the selection set. So of course, 4MCAD gives you a way of doing that, where you can go to your options, your drawing options. In the selection tab, there is a toggle that allows you to use Shift to add to selection. And once you toggle that on, the difference will be that you'll have to hold down Shift essentially to select items. So, right now, if I click on one item over here, I click on a dimension and then I click on this hatch and then I click on this block reference. It's all different items, right? Versus when I hold down Shift and then I start clicking on things, it'll keep on adding them to my selection set, and we'll see that there's 4 items that are currently added. Another way to do selection is not just by clicking, but rather by these crossing windows. So what is the difference? Well, there's two types. I'll call them window and crossing. By window, I mean everything that is entirely encompassed within the window, and then crossing is something where even if it's partly touching um, our rectangle, it will still be considered as part of the selection. So what I mean by that is, for example, we have this window over here. Since I started it from left to right, you know, we see that no one object is entirely within this window. So since it's left to right, nothing should be selected. And that is what happens, right? Since there is not even a single object that is entirely contained within this window, nothing ends up getting selected. Versus, let's say we look at this chair over here. Now we see that the entire chair is within this window. So once I release it, it ends up getting selected. Versus what I mean by crossing is if I drag from the right to the left, now we'll see that each one of these items should get selected, and it does, because anything that intersects with this rectangle will end up getting selected. Just keep this in mind when you're working with objects. It definitely helps. So context menu, quite simple. You can open it up once you select an object and then by right clicking. There's a lot of features that are added to that context menu where you don't have to go into the edit pane and then kind of figure out where a certain functionality is, where a certain editing tool is, but rather you can just select an object and then right click, and then that tool will come about. So all that I'm saying is, you select an object and then once you right click, you'll see that there's a lot of these, especially at the bottom over here, a lot of these tools to play around with, which are, trim, extend. All of these are kind of the same ones that we see within this edit tool, where we have extend over here, we have trim over here, and so on. So, very similar tools. I've mentioned an explanation for some of them over here, including delete, mirror, align, move, and copy. You're welcome to take, by the way, and this is a generic thing for our entire presentation. You're welcome to take screenshots in the middle if you want to. I won't be going over every item in each slide, but rather doing a generic overview and then trying to focus a bit more on the application side of it. So trying to focus a bit more on how that functionality works on 4MCAT rather than the explanation that I've given over here, because the explanation is more for you to, record right now, take a screenshot right now, and then come back to it, if you ever want to reference something like this. Um, Similarly, some of the features we discussed in this previous, or not discussed, but mentioned in this previous slide, and then there are some features, of course, that are mentioned in this slide as well. This kind of gives you a good summary, I would say, of all these small, minor features such as scale, stretch, because all of these are important. There's a specific pattern that needs to be followed or a specific route that needs to be followed for you to perform a certain operation. For example, if you want to trim something, you can't just go ahead and click a few buttons for something to happen, but rather there is an order that needs to be maintained for you to successfully perform the trim operation. So what I've tried doing over here in these slides is, you know, maybe having one line that explains what the functionality does, and then maybe one line that kind of tries giving you a guideline or at least an indication of what can be done, or how to approach that. How to approach that. Of course, the only tools that we have aren't just the tools that I've shown you right now from the right click menu aren't the only tools that we have, but rather Forum CAD also offers us the ability within the home page as well as the edit ribbon. So within the home ribbon, sorry, as well as the edit ribbon, for a bunch of these additional tools. And you'll see that some of these ones, especially like a rectangular array, aren't really present within the right click menu that we've been seeing. So this is the modify panel over here, or the edit panel, whatever you want to call it. And there is this edit panel over here as well. And this allows you to, you know, have multiple things for modify and, work a little bit with your selection set or selection filter, as well as the draw order. And this is going to become important, especially once you start annotating. You start realizing that sometimes your annotations are coming over your object. So let's say you've drawn the rectangle and you're trying to mention the dimension of the rectangle. It might actually um, come above the dimension layer, might actually end up coming above the rectangle layer. So you might want to change that. So the draw order is meant to, help out that way where you can select different entities to bring to the front, to push back, or to bring one entity to the front compared to another entity, or based on another entity. So yeah, just coming back to this, there are multiple ways of modification. Right now, the one that are mentioned within these slides are the home ribbon, the modify panel under the home ribbon, as well as the modify panel under the edit ribbon. But keep in mind that you can, of course, always select an object and then right click to edit things. Um, Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a few minutes, maybe 10, 15 minutes, I'd say, to kind of brush over a few of the tools that we have for modifying objects. So each site will kind of show you how you can you can take a screenshot to follow what how to execute each function. So if you want to rotate, take a screenshot of that section over here, and then you can follow along later, or you can follow along right now. But it's nothing too complex. So let's start with something. Let us start with inserting a very drawing a very basic rectangle. And let's want this 3500, and I'll leave this at 1500. And then always remember that the dynamic input, which is the input that is shown over here, you can always type out the commands rather than having to go within this top panel over here and then doing something. So for example, right now, since I want to rotate, I can just go ahead and click on the button over here, or I can type it out within the dynamic control as well. What does it remember that the prompt either will be shown over here or will be shown the dynamic input. So right now it's asking me to select the entities to rotate. And most of the commands are going to look like this. Well, they'll guide you as to what you need to do rather than assume that you already know how the operation works. And you can always, yeah, very easily, um, yeah, it will be shown in both places basically. And always remember that whenever this small sort of arrow is shown, uh, right next to the select entities to rotate text. That means that we can open up this, we can sort of click the down arrow. That's what I usually like to do. And select some sort of an option. So right now, the only option that I have is filter, but there might be more. Let's say there were 10 options, so there would be a list of 10 items over here. And you can see that the filter option is available over here as well. So I can always click in this location and then have it perform that operation instead. So let's retry the rotate command. It asks me to select entities to rotate. I will select this. It asks me to select the rotation point. I will select this as the rotation point. And it's very simple. We see that the polar lines are also appearing as they should, since we have enabled polar tracking and our angles are 45 degrees. We see that oh, sorry, I accidentally clicked. We see that the lines we are getting are about 45 degrees in, let me get back to, yeah. So they are about 45 degrees, not about, they are exactly 45 degrees. And yeah, I can always snap it to this place, and now we see that we've shifted 180 degrees. Yeah. Scale entities, again, very simple to do. All that we need to do is select an entity, press enter. This is pressing enter is what like locks in whatever you've done. So right now, just typing in the value isn't going to be enough, but rather you have to press enter to essentially confirm that this is what you want to proceed with. So right now it's asking for a base point. I will select this corner over here. And right now, if I do one, it will be the same as what we have right now. That's not really too useful. So maybe what I'll do is I will change the scale to 2. And we see that I believe we entered 3500 by 1500. If we go to this polyline over here, you see that the length is 7000 now, so 3500 times 2. And the same goes for the width. So yeah. Oh, and one thing I may not have discussed, or no, am I gonna have the time to discuss? But do note that there are like all these little 3D tools as well. If you end up using Draw 3D, this part of 4MCAD, which is available in the professional version. So just keep this in mind when you are working with 4MCAD. Mirror and offset, quite simple to do. Mirror, as the name suggests, what it does is, let me create a straight line. What mirror does is, you know, creates a mirror image of something along a certain axis. So what do we want to mirror? We want to mirror this rectangle uh, with the start line. We want to be somewhere over here, and then we can have the ending be over here as well. Let me retry this since I locked in the wrong position. So we see that right now I can sort of select a bunch of things to, and depending on the axis that I select, I can always, okay, we can try this. Delete the original entities. No, I don't want to delete it. I just select that specific option, and then I can click on it with my mouse or press enter. Both work. But we saw that along this axis, it deleted, oh, sorry, it mirrored the entity that was there. Offset is, let's say, let's call it 100. Let's select this entity. And we see that what offset does is we selected this rectangle and then we enter the distance 100. So either it will offset it by 100. In the inward direction, there's only two possible ways, right? Or either we're offsetting in the outward direction. So depending on what I want to do, it'll adjust itself accordingly. So let's say right now we offset in the inward direction. So we see that this inward layer is created. And if we look at the length and width, we see that both are reduced by 200 because it's 100 from each side. Using break and join. Okay, so let's draw a line. Actually, let's make the, so ignore the the layers for now. I'm just using it for whatever color is more appealing. Let's use this for now. Sure, this works. So break, there's a few break commands that um, come in over here. Break line, break at a point, and the break command itself. And we'll see that um, even over here, we have offset, we have all these. We have break over here, and then yeah, break at point is under this as well. So let's say if we just want to do a break, ask us to select the entity that we want to break. So let's say we do this. So this, I believe, would be a distance of 100, 200. I'm not sure. Basically, you can customize this distance, but I don't really like using this command, but rather I generally prefer the command break at point because all that it does is and specify the breakpoint. So maybe I want the, oh, maybe I want the intersection. So then what it will do is, oh, sorry, let me explore this first. Yeah, so now each line is separate. And then what we can do is break it point because there's no point in breaking it if it's all joined together, right? So this is the entity that I want to break. This is my breakpoint, and we see that this entity is now separate from this entity or this line. You know, both of them are sort of separate. And all that join does is basically they're essentially the opposite, where I can select different entities. Let's select all these lines that we broke up right now, and we see that now it's an entire object uh, back again. It was a polyline previously. As we see these other ones, they were polylines, and now this one's a polyline as well. So that's how break and join kind of work. Break at point is what I prefer. So I would advise you on using that command as well. Um, Boundaries, very simple to understand, a very simple slide, I'd say, where all that they do is, as the name suggests, they just create a boundary around whatever region you specify. So either you can specify a polyline where you can kind of map out the area that you want to draw a boundary for, and then it'll draw like a big object, boundary object, or you can also maybe select an object rather than drawing one out, especially if you've already drew out the region that you want to be counted as a boundary. So you can do that as well. Fillet and chamfer, now these are important tools, I would say, used quite a lot in drawings. I'm going to give you an example of the this office drawing, and once you start noticing, or once you start seeing, you'll actually, or once you start having a deeper look, is what I mean to say. You start seeing that it's actually being used, or the fillet and chamfer are actually being used in a few places over here. And one of those places might be to actually construct this chair. The corners over there have actually been chamfered, and then we see that even this table or this table, both this has been chamfered, and then this has been filleted. So how do we perform those operations? Let's do this. Let's insert a different rectangle, and the main reason why I want to do that is so that the color is a bit more appealing. Right now, I'm not liking the color scheme that we follow. Let's have it 2000 in this direction. Oh, sorry, I didn't click 2000 in this direction, and then 3000 back in this direction, 3000 back in this direction, and then we can now see there were multiple options over here, and then I can go ahead and uh, select whichever one I'm more interested in. So since I want close, that is what I will end up selecting. And if I retry this operation, so if I do a line over here, we see that there are different options that I have selected. And once I've drawn two lines, you see that the options over here have sort of expanded, where now I can also close. And if I click over here right now, it'll actually close the object for me. So that is good. That's what we're looking for. But right now, coming back to chamfer and fillet, let's go into our edit tool, and let's go into chamfer. What does it say? It says select the first entity. So let's select this. Select the second entity, sure. And we see that all that we needed to do was basically that. And we didn't need to do anything else. And that's quite helpful. You saw that right now the corners haven't been retained. So this is because in our options, in our drawing options, we did not specify this within the chamfer and fillet settings. So there is, of course, if you go into your drawing settings, oh, sorry, it was an entity modification. Yeah, we see over here that under entity modification, you have this option of removing the corners or retaining the corners. You have this option of specifying the radius. You have the option of specifying the distance itself, and you can do it based on an angle. You can do it based on based on a few factors indeed. So right now, since I've selected remove corners, that's why it gets rid of the corners within our drawing. So yeah, right now we showed that this is the way we use chamfer, and then we can go ahead and use fillet as well. It's very similar to it. We select the first entity that we want to fillet, and then the second that we want to fillet against, and it'll just join the two up. And we see that it'll create this as a third entity. There are a few properties that this holds, but essentially, in essence, it is obviously an arc. It will have maybe a start angle and an angle, a radius, etc. And the radius is 150 because that is what we specified within our settings. Let me just replicate that. Okay, so coming back to the slides, using divided measure, and these are important ones because there is a slight distinction between the both. Measure, essentially what it does is it will add points for you based on a specified distance. So let's say I have this line that I want to add points to. Obviously, we see that the length has reduced because of the cutting over here. So 150 from both sides added up together is 300. 2000 minus 300 is 1700. Hence the length being 1700. But coming back to this, if we want to use the measure operation, we select the entity that we want to measure. It's already selected. And sorry, 1 second. Sorry, I want to measure this. Specify segment length. So I will specify, I believe 0 might have been entered previous, but I would specify 1700. Let's say a point every 300. So we see that points were added over here. And it started at I believe it started at the top, and we can sort of see that if we, and this should be about, oh, sorry, this should be about, I would, okay, I'll show you later, but the idea is that this will be 300, and then it'll be 300 the other way around as well. So, sorry, not the other way around, but it'll be 300, and after every 300, it'll show you the point, and then as soon as like we get over the length, it'll stop. So it won't add any more points that are beyond that. So if we just try playing around with it again, let's select this line instead. Let's set this segment length to be 300, and then all that I was trying to do previously was I don't want it to be annotated, but rather I want it to be standard. And the issue is that I'm not using the right snap. So let's select this. Let's do nearest because I just want to give you an estimate. So see, it's about 300. This is because like it's not exactly 300 because the snap settings is incorrect, but it is approximately 300. Note how I access the snap settings, by the way. I held control and then right click. So if I right click in general, it will show me this. If I right click with an object, it will show me this. But then if I control right click, it'll always show me this menu instead. Um, divide sort of works the opposite way. It still divides things up, but rather you can specify portions that you want it to be divided up into. So what I mean by that is I can say divide it into 10 portions or have 10 points of a cut. So it will divide it into 10 or 11 or whatever portions. And that's the idea. each portion's length is going to be equal. We saw that in measure. The last portion may be equal to the others, might not be equal to the others. So, we try keeping this in mind. But editing polylines and splines quickly, very easy to do. The polylines or splines themselves will give you grips that you can kind of hold and play around with. At the same time, you can go into edit mode for both polylines and splines. The way to do is of course, shown in the slide. Very easy following along. And generally, the grips make it very easy to be able to edit an object. Even if you want to edit a line, you have those grips to be able to extend or trim or, do a bunch of things to a line. This give me one minute. Okay, so coming back, editing both polylines and splines is quite easy and nothing too complicated to be worrying about. Trim and extend, both functionalities that are quite self-explanatory, but if you want to quickly look over them, there are a few interesting things that 4MCAT offers us. So let's say we are in this. So if we go into, sorry, I was a bit zoned out. But if we go into this trim tool, it asks us to select cutting entities for trim. Enter to select. What does that mean? It means that with reference to that line, we will be trimming. So for example, if I select this line and I press enter, there are two things that we can do with this. If I want to trim this line, we see that it allows us to trim this line over here up until the point that it intersects with this line, or it allows us to do the opposite as well, where the other line, it allows us to trim, starting at whatever point the line is starting at, and then up until this point that we select. We see that if we retry this operation, and now it tells us and that we can possibly press enter to select all. What does that mean? Well, if we go ahead and do that, now we can see that it will keep everything within our drawing as a reference. So if we want to delete, uh, if I click over here, it will delete anything that is intersecting first in both directions. So, you know, over here, it will delete this because this was the first point of intersection in this direction. And then this was the first point of intersection in this direction. And, I can do this for anything, essentially, where it's removing all of these lines with reference to whatever entity it first intersects with. So right now it intersects with this entire point as well as this filleted corner. So hence it removes the entity, or hence it removes that portion um, altogether. Now arrays are an important one. These essentially allow you to be able to scale up one item into multiple items, especially if they are replicating. So let me give you all a quick example. Let's say we draw a circle over here. And let's say I want to copy over this chair. Now think of this as a dining table. Maybe obviously I might want to be able to enter more chairs. Now either I can do it manually where I can rotate each item and then kind of adjust it according to this dining table. Or what I can do is probably go into the edit pane over here Instead of having a rectangular array, we see that there is this polar array option. There's also this path array, but let's focus on the polar array because that allows us to follow along an entire circle. So it says select entities to array. Okay, we want to array this here. Select specify center point of array. So the point that we want is, the center point. And we see that it immediately comes up with 6 tiers over here. We can, of course, decrease or increase that quantity. So right now I've made it 8, or I can, add multiple levels to it, even in the vertical direction. So not just horizontal. By vertical, I mean within the z-axis in the 3D space. It's a very powerful tool, and I can go ahead and close the array, and depending on what setting I've kept, all of these will remain as block references. I can also have them stored entirely as one object, as a sort of an array object, but I've chosen not to do that right now. But this is just for you to keep in mind. With if you're trying to build something, this is very useful. Saves you a lot of time. The slides will go over in a bit more detail again, since I'm trying to speed up a little bit. I've taken a bit more time than I should have with the initial slide. So yeah, stretch and lengthen, um, very self-explanatory. Um, one point to note over here is sometimes when 4MCAD asks you to select something, it will be important whether you are dragging from the left to right versus from the right to left. So what do I mean by that? Dragging from the left to right doesn't really take note of what points you are dragging from, but rather just cares about whether an entity is within that window or not. Versus this really cares about what those edges or exact area is along which you have stretched out this rectangle. So there are operations like scale, um, maybe even lengthen, that might form differently if you select an object like this versus if you select an object like this. So, it's important to keep that in mind. And, you can try it out on your own time where, if you select an object one way, you might see, especially with scale, you might feel that it's working more like move, like the operation move, rather than actually scaling it. And it's because of the selection, the type of selection that you've done. So, important to keep that in mind. Hatching and gradients. Very simple topic, I would say, but important nonetheless. So, what is hatching? Well, hatching is just this area that we see over here. And, there's these dotted, or sorry, not dotted, but these curved dotted lines actually, that we see within this outside area of the wall, and not just there, but in this part of the pavement, you can say as well. This is one sort of hatch, and this is obviously a different sort of hatch. There is a polyline over here, and there is a hatch over here, you know. And the idea is that these are there to mark out spaces, to visually give you an indication of where a certain space obviously is. So let's just go into the hatching layer, and let's do this. Let us create a quick rectangle. Let me go into the zero layer, okay, so that I stop using these other layers for no reason. Okay, simple, very simple, two rectangle. Now, if I want to, oh, yeah, okay, there are multiple ways that we can open up a hatch. Right now, what I did was I went into the draw ribbon and I clicked on the hatch icon over there. I could have opened it with the ribbon panel as well, or I could have used dynamic input. There's multiple commands that essentially allow you to end up in the same place. But the hatch is, of course, One of them where it allows you to come up with a hatch. I think if I type in just hatch, it allows us to come up with the same menu as well. So there's multiple ways to go about um, creating a hatch. Coming back to forum cat, let's try creating one right now. So I'll use the UI to keep it simple. Now there's a few important things, important points to note over here. Oh, sorry, from the wrong thing. Yeah, a few important things to note over here. There is the type, of course, different types predefined as what is already available within forum cat. I will just use that, much easier to follow along with it, so I'll just prefer using that by default. There is the pattern, so there's many patterns that are there again by default. Right now, I'm just choosing the first or second or the first few ones that are there. No need to go to extravagant. Color. This is the, this could be red, but or this could be whatever color is there of the hatch, but I'll keep it by layer. That's what you're probably most interested in. This is the background color, so probably keep it as none to keep your drawing simple. You don't want to add unnecessary coloring or complication, something that is, quite simple. Angle and scale, we'll see the difference between both in a bit, but the idea is that as you increase the scale, the separation of the lines for the pattern within the hatch gets separated out. Boundaries. This is where you sort of define what your hatch does or how your hatch looks like. I will choose to keep it as normal. So I guess if we want to do that, let's draw another rectangle over here so that I can actually demonstrate what are the differences between the three options. Okay, so the idea is that all of these we've already set up. Uh, Associative, we can keep the associative short. Uh, the difference is if we resize the rectangle, the hatch will readjust itself as well for the resize according to the resized rectangle, especially if we use it as the boundary. The draw order is important. It's what determines that, the boundary that we draw, is it sent behind the boundary or is it kept in front of the boundary? That is the hatch kept behind the boundary or in front of the boundary? The layer transparency, quite self-explanatory. Let's go ahead and pick an internal point. Careful, like take note of the island style that we've selected over here. So right now I've just selected the normal one. If I go ahead and click over here and I press enter, we see that what did it do? It created a hatch in this outside area where I pressed enter, but then not within the inner portion of that region, but or the immediate inner portion. But it did create the hatch for the portion after that. And that is very much what you see within this image over here, where there is a hatch in this outer region, and then the immediate inner region, you don't see a hatch. And then the immediate inner region of that, you do see a hatch. So there is this alteration that is going on. And that is important to keep in mind with. It might be useful in some cases for you, it might not. So yeah, there's a few other options, of course, that you have as well. Um, I can press escape, but all that this does is it only creates a hatch within the outer area that I've selected and then doesn't really care about anything else within. So it won't care about this inner rectangle that is there. Ignore all what it does is it doesn't care about any of the, not even the most immediate rectangle or immediate boundary or sorry, immediate closed space, but rather it just draws a hatch within or whatever region that you specify. Now you'll see that this is actually, these are all 45-degree lines. but they look very different when we look at it from the space, and that is because the scale is quite small right now. So let's change this to 100. Let's preview. See, and this is looking much better. You might want to make it more less complicated, or I guess less stuck together. You might want to make it a bit more dense. So that all depends on what you want to do and what the nature of your project is. So let's just preview this just to make sure. Okay, I like that density, and so let's just keep it that way. And we see that it'll be on a hatch layer as a hatch, not on a hatch layer, sorry, but it'll be there as a hatch. If you go back to our slides, we'll see that we can go ahead with creating a hatch this way. And then the good thing with 4M CAD is it'll also allow us to create a gradient um, using this method. So creating a gradient, again, very simple, very similar, I would say, to a hatch, and you'll see that the menu looks very similar as well. And the funny thing is it's actually um, within the same space. So the hatch we created. The island style of that was normal. So we'll keep the island style of the gradient normal as well. All that it requires is for us to pick up colors, and then we can go ahead and specify an internal point, and it creates the gradient um, for us. The thing is, the draw order is not correct. So let me try something. Okay. Let's go to this. And let's say set a boundary. The issue is that it's creating a boundary for us. But the main idea is that you can create a gradient if you want to, or you can create um, a hatch if you want to. Really depends on what is your preference. You can also, if you want to, create both and then have one on top of the other. So there's a lot of freedom that is offered in this in 4MCAT. So yeah, just keep these things in mind. Actually there's only one do. So, but note that there is this hatch over here, and then we can always go ahead and create a gradient as well. Okay. And I'm not sure whether we made it annotated or not, but if you make it annotated, then you can, you know, then you can drag the rectangles over here, and that'll allow you to resize your gradient as well. Oh, okay. We see that the dynamic input also offers us, or I guess there is a command to be able to send um, a hatchback, especially if you are drawing both a hatch as well as a gradient. You can manage both or the drawing order of both so that you ensure that one stays above the other. So that is important. Else a gradient is going to take over and you won't be able to see your hatch, or especially if you have an alternating color, a secondary color within your hatch, you won't be able to see the gradient. If I undo this and come back to the hatch, um, you might be wondering how does one go ahead and edit it? Well, very simple. You can just either you can click on it and type in the command hatch edit in one go without any space, or you can literally just go ahead and double click on the hatch itself, and that will open up the settings, you'll see that the island section is blocked out. This is mainly because, I mean, this part is already there, it's already implemented. So like that is, a basic base case. You can't change that any further, but you can change, let's say, the scale, the color, the pattern, all these things. Even you can make it annotative or associative if you want to do that, as well as change the draw order, the transparency of the hatch, or um, and this you can do anytime where you can change the layer that the hatch resides on. If you don't want to see this entire menu though, you can always click on this small little icon over here. It's not too useful, especially when you're editing hatches rather than drawing them, because when you're editing them, all of this part is kind of useless because it's not really accessible. So you can close it up if you want. And always remember that there is this preview button there that allows you to preview anything any changes that you've done before you've actually saved them. Okay, we move towards the last portion of the first part of today's session, which is going to be focusing on the entity and layer properties. Working with entity properties is very simple. All that it requires you to do is, you know, open up the properties panel and then keep it within your window somewhere. I always have it there by default on this left part on this left part of my screen, but obviously you can have it wherever you want. The way to open it up, very simple. Again, you select an object and you can right click, and then you have this properties as well as quick properties. Quick properties is a bit different, where it'll open up this smaller window. But I always like to stick with the basic, the properties window that is there. Just have it fixed within a certain portion of your window and just keep it there because it always gives you helpful information depending on what item you've selected. And it's of course it adjusts itself. Or if I'm selecting an arc, it's going to give me different information about maybe what the center point of that arc is, what the radius is, what the angle of that arc is, versus if I have a line. The properties will of course adjust, and now it's going to be length, um, what the start point of that line is, what the end point of that line is, rather than what, for example, a center of a circle is. So always, 1 second, always keep that in mind. Note that what I did right now is regen. So since these points are kept as, like their setting is kept as 5% of my screen, if I zoom in, zoom out, depending on what settings you have kept. I haven't turned it on, but depending on what settings you've kept, this might look a bit small or a bit too large. So whenever, I feel like I wanted to regen or regenerate, you can just type in the command regen and it will show you the points. Uh, again, if you want to do it manually. I don't like that this is automated because then if I'm zooming in, zooming out, it'll always be resizing. And I don't want it to be like that right now. At least yeah, at least right now. So coming back to the entity properties though, as I explained, there will be different properties for the different entities that you select. And you can, the important ones, especially the ones that are in this generic one, are going to be things like line type, what the scale is of that line type, line weight, the layer that the layer that this item, this entity sits on, what color it holds, very, very basic, maybe the transparency, very, very basic things that are important and you might need to quickly change. So it's always helpful to have this within this left space over here. So changing the line type still, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but you can see over here we saw that we can do it within the properties. You can do it via dynamic input as well by typing LT scale. And yeah, I mean, of course, there's multiple ways of doing it. You can also use the UI, but there's no point in getting into that. The easiest one is probably by doing it from the properties section. or worst case scenario, you can just type in line type scale, the LT scale, and it'll allow you to do the appropriate modification. Now, hide layers and isolate layers. This is an important one. So what do these do? Select entity to turn off the layer for all viewports. Let's say I want to turn off the layer for this. Okay. Let's let's take a 1 minute, 2 minute break right now. Just give me 1 or 2 minutes. Hello, yes, I'm back. So we were talking about using hide um, as well as isolate. So, both quite understandable. You can see what they mean, hide a certain layer. So right now we saw that within the UI, when I clicked on that one item, it hid the entire layer because of the command that I ordered, right? I entered in layer off, and that means layer off. So it turned off all the layers for that. There was a carpet actually placed within this region. If I go ahead and undo this, we see that there was this carpet that also got turned off. And all that it does is it turns off that layer. Versus what isolate would do is it would kind of do the opposite, where it would turn off all the other layers and then um, keep the current layer visible, the selected layer that you've selected visible. So creating new layers and using the layer dropdown. So let's go into the home panel, this, and open up this panel. You can also click on this layers explorer. So there's a few things that you can do with the layer. I mean, first of all, the most basic one is you can, of course, go ahead and create a new layer over here. There's a lot of ways for you to do that, to create a new layer. This is just one of them. But yeah, you can go ahead, create a new layer, give it a name, give it a color, give it a line type. So there's various line types that are over here, and you can go ahead and load other line types as well, depending on your requirement. There is also this on-off switch, this lock, unlock, and freeze and thaw. You'll notice that there is you know, you might be questioning why there's an on-off switch as well as a freeze slash thaw switch. Uh, The reason is very simple. One of these does one thing, and then the other does a sort of a different thing. What on-off does is it just visibly um, it turns a layer on and off. So all the computation that goes in terms of building a layer, when you move your screen around, when you drag across across the drawing, it still happens in the background for that layer. So it's not that it's disabled, but it's just that visibly it's hidden. Like think of it as the transparency being put to 100%, but all the operations are still being done. Versus what freeze slash thaw does is that once I freeze a layer, it'll be hidden from my view, as well as any computation that is being done will also be hidden. So if you have a layer that is heavy, that is, very computationally heavy, you might want to draw it out first and then freeze it until the final stages of your project where you actually want to show it on the paper space. Then you can sort of unfreeze it or thaw it and then make it visible within your paper space so that there isn't any unnecessary computation that is going on that is slowing down your PC. And besides these settings, lock and unlock, very simple. Um, it locks up the layer. So you can't delete items, for example, off of the layer. And you'll see that if I go into this border layer, which is what these rectangles are, and I lock it, it becomes into this transparent sort of style. So keep that in mind, where it'll look a bit different. So you'll kind of know what layer is locked and what layer is involved. The line weight is also there. It determines the thickness in the sense of your line. And there's a lot of defaults that are already, or sorry, not defaults, but a lot of weights that are already there. Transparency, you can change the value directly over here. And then there's a few other options that you have if you right click on one of these layer. You make a layer active, and by active I mean this is the current layer that you're working on. You see that the current layer, it's visible at the top as well as over here. You see that it's 0. If you want it to be border, I can just go ahead and double click on this one right now. I can also go ahead and select dimensions over here, for example, and it'll set dimensions as the active layer that I'm working on. So if I go ahead and draw a line, now we see that it's red in color and it's going to be the dimensions layer. And do that. But yeah, please draw Thor, lock, and lock. I've already explained these to you. And then right now, what I opened up was the Layers Explorer. There's a few other ones as well. There's the Layer States Manager, and we saw that it was this visible over here. And this allows you to set up different layer states for your current drawing. I'm not gonna get into it too much because I don't know how much you'll end up using it, but you can always, of course, always go ahead and create a new one and then be able to edit it so that you can set up a kind of state for one drawing, or one, let's say you're just sharing a drawing with other people. They might want to be in a different state, you might want to be in a different state. So you can set up sort of defaults for each state and then select whichever one you're working on. So your colleague can select a different state, you can select a different state, and then the way that it looks, maybe the colors, maybe um the freeze thaw, maybe some layers are turned off for you, but then are turned off for the other. So you can customize it and very quickly load one or the other state depending on your need. So that is about it. As much as I uh, wanted to show for exploring layers. It's an important tool to be used within 4MCAD. You can see that within this drawing that I have, each thing is sort of layered to a certain part within the layers that I've specified, and I've tried naming everything in an appropriate manner as well. So if there is a chair, if there is a plant, if there is a table, if there is a door, everything is supported by an appropriate layer. And all of this is done to create a sense of hierarchy, to create a sense of, you know, to separate things out, essentially. Where if I want to select all the doors within my drawing, let's say there's 100 doors, I'll easily be able to do that. If I want to select all the tables, if I want to maybe hide all the tables, hide all the chairs, hide certain things, then it'll be very easy for me to do that if everything has been ordered correctly. And that is the idea behind a good design, is making changes to it is is an easier task. So that is about it for the layer session. Let's take if you have any questions, of course, feel free to drop them in the chat. Let's take about a 5-minute break, I would say, before we start out, jump into the next session. I'll quickly share with you what it's going to be about. I'll just keep this screen shared so that if you have any questions about any of these topics, about annotations, about external references, or anything about publishing, about printing, about setting up the page setup manager, you can go ahead and prep them up and ask them in the chat. So yeah, just give me 5 minute break. I'm gonna get some water and then we'll come back and then finish this training off. Hello everyone. So let's continue on with our training. Right now we only have one last session remaining, and no, it's on annotation, sharing references, as well as publishing, as well as a few other smaller ones. So you'll see that tables has been added in, viewports has also been added in. These smaller topics that we'll discuss as well because they are important, and especially when you're working towards the final part of your design where you gotten familiar with Forum CAD, you have created the objects that you need to create, you have modified those objects appropriately, and then now you're working more towards annotating your design so that you can let them out into the world. You can, pass it off so that they can be printed and then sort of be implemented wherever they need to be implemented. So that is the agenda sort of for this last session. You can call this session 4 if you think of it, everything as being in session 1 and session 2 being on the first, the session 3 and 4 being today. Or you can think of it as the second part of the second session that we're offering today. Whatever, um, whatever you think of it, the areas that we're going to be covering are the same. So let's start with annotating your design. There's going to be a specific pattern that we follow for each of the style of the text that we're talking about. So even if we're just here talking about the regular text, even if we're talking about multi-line text, even if we're talking about um, dimensions, even if we're talking about multi-leaders, there's always going to be a specific format that we follow. But first, we're going to discuss about how we define a new style. Where the manager, the explorer, for that certain style is. So right now we look at the textile manager or the textile explorer, depending on what your preference is. What kind of UI are you more comfortable with? Um, but right now, let's go into the annotator and take a minute or two to actually look at what is there. Of course, the home ribbon also offers this annotation panel, but it's very basic compared to all of the options that you have that are offered over here. Since this is okay, let's switch to the screen instead for this session. And this is because this is more focused towards this session where I don't have to draw everything out, but rather I can talk a bit more and explain in more detail. So we see that there is this annotate panel. There is the text and the text style manager on the left. Then there is this dimension style manager and then different kinds of dimensions that we have in both these places. Then there is also this being able to edit a dimension text, rotating, repositioning, whatever. There's this baseline continuous, we're going to be discussing these things. Um, there's a few of these dimensions that you can draw. And, there's a few of these breakpoints that you can create as well. some center marks that you can create, some lines that you can create. There is also this multi-leader or this leader, and of course, as with a style, there also comes a manager. So there is the multi-leader styles manager, and then lastly, or I guess not exactly last, but there is the revision cloud in this markup section over here, as well as a wipeout area. And then there is the ability to, of course, add a table. And there is this table styles manager as well that you can open up. So going back to our slide, the first thing is using creating a text style by the text styles manager. So where is the text style? This text style is, of course, within this left region over here in this text region. The text style manager you can open up by just clicking on the icon over here, and we see that there is a current style name, and we can of course create a new one. We can rename it. We can rename the current one that we've selected, or we can delete it. Creating a new one is very simple. It basically looks like this, where text is, very simply kept. You can either make it annotative, not annotative. This one isn't annotative, but the idea behind having annotative text is that depending on the scale you select in this bottom portion over here, the size of the text on the screen will readjust, or relative to the drawing, I guess, is a better way of putting it, will readjust. So this will become more useful when we're in the paper space. Right now, since we are playing around in the drawing space, we'll keep annotative off, but I will show you later on what turning it on looks like. You can, of course, change the font, the style of the font, you can change the height of the text, you can change the width factor, you can have it print the other way around, you can have it print upside down. There's a few things that you can do with the text that you have. But the idea is that once you have done all these things, you can go ahead and we are in this text layer actually, which is good. So within this text there, you can go ahead and just click. No, oh sorry. Let's change this to text. You can go ahead and click anywhere. Rotation, I don't want any rotation to be there. And I can just say hello world. If I double click, if I double press enter, it will go ahead and change the, it will go ahead and enter it as text. I can also enter multi-line text, but that is also quite simple to do. Let's keep our layer as text. So adding multi-line text is also quite easy to do. I can select the region by going to the annotate panel, clicking multi-line, and then select the region I want the text to be around, or kind of moving towards. And then I can go ahead and type as you would in any other software. Think of Microsoft Word or whatever. Or any, yeah. Okay. And you can of course select all. You can make it bold if you want to. You can italicize it. You can underline it. You can change the font. There's all these whether it's left aligned or center aligned or right aligned. What is the justification? If you want to create a list, how do you go about creating a numbered list or a bulleted list? So there's a lot of these small things that you can do that 4MCAT allows you to do. So keep that in mind when you are creating your drawings, when you're coming up with your drawings, and especially when you are in this layout space where you are in the paper view and coming up with what the final picture for your drawing is going to look like. All of these small, minor things are quite important. These should be kept in mind. But remember that the text style manager is what allows you to manage this text. And then once you are creating them, once you are creating a piece of text or you are creating a multi-line text, this is where you can actually go ahead and edit it. So if you want advanced editing, probably prefer to go with multi-line text because that's what allows you to have this. more advanced text editor, I would say. And yeah, that is about it for the text part of annotations. There are, of course, um, you know, with any manager, there is, of course, an explorer as well. So nothing too nothing too complicated though. Very similar to the manager, where only the UI will be a bit different, but the explorer itself will be doing the same or will be offering the same functionality that is offered by a manager. So the textile manager or the textiles explorer, both of them will be, in essence, performing the same operations. So to do that, I mean, I've already shown you multiple ways of accessing this. That are all of them are written at the top over here. I'll keep it simple. I will use the XP fonts. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. I was deleting an item over there. So my bad. Let me drag this to the window. Yes. So now you should be able to see the fonts. And we see that we can add in a new item over here. And as we saw within the manager, all the options that we have over here in terms of the height, in terms of the font name, the style, the language, whether we want it to be backwards or upside down. Now, what name do we want to give to the style? All of those are available over here. So depending on what your preference is, for the way you want to add in a style, you can either use an explorer or you can use a manager. The functionality that they offer is sort of the same. The only advantage with an explorer is sort of you can see everything in the same space rather than having to click on the drop down and selecting a specific item that you would have to do in a manager. If you want to explore this explorer further, this textile explorer, you can go ahead and take a screenshot right now of this whole menu and be able to explore it in a bit more detail. But as I've said before, it's the same functionality that you get with an explorer as you would with a manager. Creating and using dimension styles. Yeah, sorry, I skipped a slide over there. Working with single line text and multi-line text, we've already discussed this. There is the text option that you have on the left of the annotate panel, and then you can also have it be multi-line text rather than single line text. So, depending on what your use case is, you want to choose one or the other. Generally, I just go with multi-line text because you can have it be on a single line and it offers you a lot of customizability as well if I want to edit it later down the line. Or, if I want to make a single line text into a multi-line text, it's easier doing that if it's, already a multi-line text. Creating and using dimension styles, a bit different than text, of course. Dimension style follow the same pattern though. They they offer you a manager over, and you can see that it's available within the same annotate panel towards the right of this text field. And you can there will also be an explorer for it as well. For now, let's open up the manager. So the manager is over here. We see that the current size and the current, sorry, dimension style selected is custom dim. Let's go ahead and modify it. Remember that new and modify will open up the same uh, menu, so you can follow along if you want to. This is for me just showing you what each thing is doing. Okay, actually select this dim over here before I actually do anything. Inside manager. Yes, I think this will make it a bit more easier to. And once I modify, yes, this will make it easier to follow. If we go into lines, you see that the dimension lines that are shown over here, the color is by the layer. So depending on what the color of the layer I have set is, it will be accordingly to that, as well as the line type and line weight. I would suggest keep most of the things by layer, and the main reason is if you want to freeze or thaw a certain layer, if you want to make it, if you want to change the color, you don't have to go into each individual dimension and then change it accordingly over there, but rather you can change it for one layer. Rather, you can just go into the layer explorer, change it for that layer, and it will apply to everything that is associated with that layer. So the dimension line and the dimension lines you can customize over here. Of course, you can suppress them as well, but not really too useful if you suppress them. So depending on what your use case is, you might want to change this. You may not want to change this. Okay. The extension lines. Um, Keep it, they should be bilayer. So let's keep it bilayer. The line type as well as the line weight, of course. Again, are gonna keep bilayer. We can, as always, or I guess with the same as with dimension line, the extension lines can also be suppressed if you want them to be suppressed. And then there is the small offset that you see of this dimension line. So, and this is primarily because there is a small gap that you will see in certain parts of your, sorry, I can't really move about it when I have the manager open, but you'll see these small little gaps that are there in the dimension. The calculation will be correct, of course, but the way that the dimension is shown to you will be a bit different. So this quantity or this amount is there to adjust for that. Symbols and arrows. These small arrows that you see on the side of this text. So L is equal to 200 meters. And then you see this arrow over here, as well as this arrow over here. This is where that arrow can be customized. I can change the size. I can increase it, decrease it. I can change the type of the arrow itself, whether I want it to be a filled arrow, whether I want it to be something else. I can also change that they are separate. So rather than both the arrows being of the same type, they can be of different types as well. Break size is a bit different, where break size is when, let's say, two annotations are overlapping, and then you want to break one annotation so that it looks a bit nicer. The break size is what determines that size. That if you increase it, the length that is broken up will be a bit more. If you decrease it, of course, the line that is broken up will be a bit less. If you keep it at zero, then there's not really much point in breaking it, because then nothing's gonna get removed from the screen. So yeah, the text, we first set a style. So this is where you can kind of see this hierarchy of first setting a text style, and then um, having a dimension style, because a dimension style is sort of dependent on a text style, where of course, a dimension will have some text. So what does that text look like? Well, that is where the text style comes in, and you can go ahead and you know on these three dots over here and select different custom styles. It opens up the same text styles manager, and you can create new ones, create new text styles. You can rename existing one, or you can delete them. But the idea is that this area over here allows you, the text appearance area, allows you to custom select a custom text. There are a few settings for that text that are already there. I guess you can say sort of imported from the text style, but then some are there as like such as text color, the background, the height, um, as well as if you're creating a new one, this height will be variable, as in you can go ahead and change it. Since I'm modifying it, it's a bit different. But once you're creating a new one, a new dimension style, this might be different. Depending on the text style you select, though, this will be limited. So keep that in mind. If you select a certain text type, you won't be able to change the text height because, of course, that's defined within the text type. So keep that in mind. Text placement is sort of an important one. Of course, it determines where you want this text to be placed. So maybe you want 22.25, you want it to be in the middle, you want it to be left aligned according to this left dimension, you want it to be right aligned, maybe you want it to be vertically going upwards from this left line, maybe you want it to be vertically going upwards from this right line. There's a lot of cases that you can have, and you can customize it to whatever your requirement is. All of these options are there within this vertical panel as well as within this horizontal panel. And you see, if I do next to first extension line, next to second extension line, above dimension 9, below dimension 9, above first extension 9, what's it? And there's a lot of these things that I can do, a lot of customizations that you can add. This I would suggest you just keep it simple. The best fit will do for this, but you can select a different option. You can try a few out, and whichever you prefer more, you can select it as that one. This you can see that these angles are changing over here. This last setting will allow us to place it manually rather than um, following the text placements that are shown over here. And this allows us to make the dimension that we are adding annotative or not. Again, since we're keeping it simple for now, I'm just showing you things that are showing you the basic features. Let's not turn on annotative, but once we start with the paper space, once we're working with the paper space, we can turn this on. The units I've kept as decimal, the precision I've kept up to 2 decimal places. You can change this. There is no hard and fast rule. Same for this separator, same for rounding off, and then same for the unit format for angles as well. Right now it's kept decimal degrees, but there's a few options that you have over here, as well as the precision that you want for those angles. So not just the precision, as well as the format for lengths and these things, but rather also for angles. And we see that all of these just all these sorts of lengths, like the length of this line, the radius or the diameter of the circle, all these things readjust. And this preview gives you a very good idea of what the final thing will look like. Alternate units you can obviously add, and these will be added in these small little brackets. But they aren't useful to us right now, so let's not waste time on them. That is about it, I would say, for the dimension style manager. There are a few things that I will discuss regards to how to modify dimension, or if you see that there is this custom text that I've added in where length is equal to, and then the length itself. So rather than just saying 50.00, you can customize what is surrounding that dimension or the text that is surrounding that dimension. Very easy to do. I'll show that to you as well a bit down the line. But adding dimensions, we already had a look at this panel. Just to give you an idea, it's this panel over here that you can add in a linear dimension. You can add in a line dimension, or you can add in an angular dimension. So, each one has their own case, but a linear might just be going from 2 points linearly, an angle might be going for, do we have an angle line? Probably don't, but let's say I want to go in between these 2 points. It'll show me the dimensions for these these 2 points on these two lines. And for the last one, the angular one. This is, you know, it shows me the specific angle. And there's various ways that it can look like. And this is because the best fit option that we chose, it's adjusting accordingly to that. We see that there's various ways that it's trying to adjust. Let's keep these three in mind. And then this is an important one as well, where this allows you to specify the diameter, the radius, as well as the center point, which often you probably won't be using, but because uh, it looks very weird. But yeah, the idea is that these are the main ones of use, and to do that, you can simply select any, any circle, and it will start showing you this sort of arrow for the diameter, for the radius, and then for the center point, you can just select a circle, and it will add a center point to that circle. Oh, okay, let's not delete that. It has put on a point for these dimensions that we've drawn. If I delete this, I will have to delete this dimension as well. I don't want to do that. Let's just leave it that way. Multileader is sort of this arrow style that we see over here. Rather than just typing out text, it gives you like a pointed arrow, and then you can type out certain sort of a text. So it also has a manager. It also, you can create a new one. You can set the current one as the default one, or you can modify it. It's not too complicated. I won't jump into too much detail, but keep it simple. Constraints, the maximum leader points. How many points do you want for the leader? We kept it as two, so that what do we want? We basically want an arrow that is coming from the let's say if you select a circle from the circle, and then it's either horizontally or vertically storing or showing some sort of text. That is about it. There's no need to be a bit go into more detail than that. So try to keep this simple. Over here, again, we see that the text side is over here. There is a text style that we can choose from. There is a text style that we can choose from. And, we can choose color, we can choose hide the justification of the text, and so on. Where the text is, is it left aligned, right aligned, where the arrows, um, or where the text is relative to the ending of the arrow line. Sorry. So all of these things you can customize over here. And of course, you can always use this to move things around as well. It's unnecessary for you to keep it in the same place where you initially clicked, but rather you can um, always move around. So keep that in mind. Um, Multi-leader style manager, very similar to the other managers that we've seen. Okay, overriding dimension text. This is what I was referring to. Let's say I want to change the text over here to say that length is equal to 150. The most simple way is probably to click on the thing, or sorry, double click on the thing. I will say length. Let's delete this is equal to, and then I can add this. Now what this does is it enters the value within this space over here and then removes these less than and greater than signs. So if I click out of this, yes, we see that it has updated. the text where now it's saying 150.00 instead of the less than and the greater than signs that I had added in. And this is, how 4MCAD works, where if it sees those within any sort of dimension, it will automatically replace them with the value for that dimension. So if you want to change the way that a certain dimension looks, you can very easily do that. Where maybe, for example, over here, I want the diameter to be a different symbol than what is shown over here. I want radius to be explicit rather than just being put put down as R. So I can customize all of those things. Continue versus continue versus baseline dimensions. So the difference between both is, and let's look at baseline first. If we draw a baseline over here, and then we put the first point as this one, and then the second point as this one. You see that the length of this is 200, but then the length of this is 250. And this is all of this is with relative to this base point that was put over here. Versus if we have continue, then what continue will do is, for example, if we have 250 over here, and then I continue, it will add another 50 for this space. It will add another 100 for this space. So wherever we last ended, and then the newer part that we have clicked on, or up until the newer part that we've clicked on, will be what continue shows versus what baseline shows us. The first point sort of where we start, and then relative to that, all of the dimensions that we are creating. Always remember that sometimes the dimensions may or may not overlap, so you can always readjust the height where if they are overlapping, for example, sometimes they might be drawn like this. That is perfectly fine. You can go ahead and readjust them to um, a different height essentially. Nothing to yeah, nothing to difficult to do. Let's move towards tables. Again, as we saw with the dimensions, as we saw with text, the multi-leader, all those, they have a manager, but then at the same time, they have an explorer as well, and the manager slash explorer allows you to add, modify, delete, rename different styles. There is, if there is a table, there will be a table style as well. So the easiest way to go into this table style is to just click on table, and then you'll see that the top left portion has this table style, and you can go ahead and open up the table style manager. Right now, you see that there is this custom table style that is there. Go ahead and click modify. You'll see that there is this general text and border section, and then there is the cell styles section and this table direction. So there's a table direction. Well, very simple. Whether the table is going from top to bottom or bottom to top. The cell styles, this is for the specific cell that we are at. So that we want to add properties to. So if we are looking at the title style, or I guess the title part of this table, then I will select the cell style as title and then appropriately, give a height, give a color, give a style. You might want the style to be different, you might want the height to be different. You'll probably want it to be a bit bigger for a title compared to a header, and then same, like a header's title to be a bit bigger um, than the text of a data cell. So we see that over here, a data cell, the height is 10, but for title cell, the height is 14. So you can go ahead and change, even the borders, the spacing around the alignment of the text, the format. It's going to be a lot over here. You can change a decent amount of things. So what I would suggest to do is always go through all three of them go through each part and then adjust the color, adjust the properties over here to everything ideally to by layer so that all of your table resides within the same layer. And again, that helps with managing your layers. So it's always good practice to follow that pattern. For now, we can go ahead and close the table size manager and then look at one of the tables that we have. I want to add in a table. Oh, I just typed in the command table and it came up with this insert table section. Let's give sorry, I want to be in the table dimension. So I want two columns. Let's have 5 data rows because why the heck not? And we see that this first one will be the title. The second one will be header one. Oh, sorry. I can double click on any cell and it will allow me to edit it. You also see that header two, there's also all these, especially if I select all this text, there's all these settings at the top to change the font, its color, the I can make the text bold, italic, on I can underline it, I can overline, add an overline to it, and change a few of these heights as well as the text style. So let's keep it standard for now. But I'm just putting it out there for you to see that there are all these customizations that you can have. You can also edit the table directly itself, so you can resize it if you want to resize it. You can change the height of the rows, you can change the height of it, you can change the width of the columns, you can change the height of the columns. There's a decent amount of things that you can do. One thing you will note is once I select a cell, it kind of gives us an outline, and then I can do certain things within it. So what do I mean? Well, there is this formula over here. So what this will allow me to do is, for example, the sum formula would, if I click on it, ask me to select the first corner of a table cell as well as the second corner. So for example, if I select these 4 cells, so row 3 till row 6, 3, 4, 5, 6, if there were any sort of integer values, they would get summed and then put into this cell over here. So let's say I add in 500, 1000. All of these are getting summed up and then put into this section over here. Let me remove this and it gets put back to 0. This is what the formula does, and there's obviously different formulas as well that you can do. The field is a bit different. The field allows you to, it has a name. So right now let us go with the entity, but there's all these, file name, file size, hyperlink, all of these that you can work with. Entity is the one that I use it with most, but what it allows you to do is sort of add a property of an object into your table, in essence. So a property can be maybe the radius of an object, maybe the circumference, maybe the area that an object takes up. So right now, if I select this circle, what are all the properties that you can have? Well, a circumference, maybe a diameter, maybe a certain color. And there's a few of them. So let's have circumference and let's set it to the format of decimal 0.0. Sure. And once I click OK, we will see that the value has gotten added over here. So the table isn't there for you to just enter custom text, but you can have it enter text that readjusts or adjusts itself according to what scenario is there. And we see that within this table cell, you have the option of inserting something above, inserting something below, being able to delete this row, being able to insert columns. So there's a lot of customizability that is provided alongside a table in Forum. Yeah. So always, keep that in mind when working with tables, the table style manager in Forum CAD. So adding a table, designing a table, we've already gone through these external references. I will be quick. This is an important one, but what are external references? Well, all external references are is think of it as you create a block. Let's say you create a chair. The chair is probably not going to be used in just one drawing, but rather it will end up being used in many drawings. And then besides that, it won't just be used by you, but rather it will be used by many other people as well. So either you can always create a block in each of the drawings that you open up, but that's not really an efficient way. So rather, what you do is you would save that as an external reference. So save that drawing that contains the chair as as a block, as a DWG file, and then be able to refer to that DWG file in different drawings. And that's all that an external reference is that it references something that is external in your current drawing. That's all that is there to um, think about or to explain about it. Now, how do you do that in 4MCAD? Well, let's go into this. Let's exit this table and let's go into this insert panel. We see that there is this attach, this XREF manager, this open XREF, flip XREF, XREF flip frame, a few of these options. So let's go into XREF manager. So there is already an attached external reference. I detached it, and now let's attach it. Let's say I want to attach landscaping area. It'll open up this menu, attach external reference. It'll give me a name. It'll give me a few options under the retain path. Now this will be different depending on what scenario you're in. So right now I will say relative path. Relative path means that wherever the current drawing is, the session 2 drawing, the this landscaping area reference that I'm trying to bring in will be relative to my current path. So maybe I put the landscaping area in the folder in a different folder, but under, let's say, in the current file, in the session 2 file, there is another folder in the same directory, and then the landscaping area is within that. So the relative path won't consider the absolute, local disk C users, my name, something, but rather directly start with the current path, the current path of the file, so of session 2, and then just directly move towards the landscaping path, which is in the next folder. So the issue with doing something like that is if I pick up this current session 2 file and put it somewhere else, then when it will try going from the current path to the next folder, it'll see that that folder doesn't exist, obviously. But with full path, it'll be a bit different where it will store the entire path. So C users, Mustafa, something, something. It will store all of that. But then the issue with that is that if you are sharing this file with other people, they'll probably not have the same username as yourself. So depending on the project that you're working on, the team setup that you have, the way your team is set up, this will look different. Probably you want it to be a relative path and have a structured approach to your DWG files where all your references are put in one place. So and the same format is followed by you as is followed by some other person, so that you don't run into this issue of um, having different paths. So let's do relative path for now. Rotation. No, I don't want it to rotate. The scale. Sure, I'll specify it on screen. And then the insertion point, I'll also specify it on the screen. So we see that it's quite a big drawing actually. And the insertion point is a bit out of place as well. So let's just add it over here. I think that is why it set the scale as 0 0.1, 0 0.1. And since this has been loaded in, we can go ahead, select it, and move it as well. So let's say I put it somewhere over here. You see that it's a bit grayed out, and that's fine. That is how it is meant to be. So don't think of it as the layer being logged or anything. That's just how it is. Okay. Attaching external references we've already had a look at, but then you know, once you attach an external reference, it's quite possible that only some area of that external reference is of interest. If that is the case, you want to be able to hide a certain portion of that external reference. So let's do that. So let's say we create a new boundary. Let's say we add a rectangle, and let's say this is the rectangle that we added in. Now, what you see right now is that it's added in this rectangle as a boundary, and then the external reference is placed within this boundary. Anything that is outside of this boundary will be ignored. So you see that how this rectangle has gotten cropped off. And if I click on this arrow, this is a feature that 4MCAT provides. It will only show me the, so we see that this green line is visible. So it will only show me the part of the drawing that is, and I can obviously readjust this. So it will only show me the part of the drawing that is outside of this boundary, the part of the external reference, sorry, that is outside of this boundary. So if I want to see the opposite view, I can just click on this arrow, and that is it. We see that this reference editor has opened up, and that's mainly because I double click on the item. But before we jump into that, let's have a look at the slide. So editing XREFs. There's a few ways of doing it. The easiest, I would say, or the simplest one is probably just to open up the external reference in a separate file and then edit it over there. And then, depending on how you have external references set up in your external references manager at the top over here, you may want to reload or you may not want to reload the specific file. Or I guess whatever reference that you have changed. You know, it's simple, keeps everything separated out, but you might want to just make a very small edit, and you might not want to open up an entirely new um, file or an instance of 4MCAT for that. So how do you go about doing that? Well, one way is to just um, Get rid of this first. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Coming back. Um, Either we can edit it within the source file, or you can open up the in place uh, editor. So how do you go about doing that? Let's close this Explorer. Let's open the edit. This is the entity that I want to change. Okay, and I can go ahead and right now maybe delete something. Sure, we can do that. And if we go back over here, you see the external reference file changed. Either it will tell us that we can reload, and once we reload, we see that it has gotten rid of stop bar that was shown over here. You can go ahead and undo that, save it, and again it will show us this reload portion over here in the bottom right part of the in this notification panel, and you can reload, and we see that the updated DWG, the latest version of the DWG is present. So very simple. Um, Ideally, for minor things, you want to use the in-place editor. Right now, I've opened it up in a new drawing. So yeah, I think it's just much easier this way, where if you open it up in a new drawing and then just quickly edit it and then close it up. No need to worry about the hassle of moving from one space in the same drawing to another space and then going back and so on. We just keep it simple. Viewports and annotation. Locking a viewport. What does this mean? Well, there's two kinds of viewports that I would say are present in FormCAD. One is, this viewport, this viewing area that I have, this viewing area that I have, and if I want, I can have two viewports or whatever, and that can maybe add into horizontal viewports, one above the other. Or let's go into session two for this. Or I can have something like these two viewports over here. For example, this is one viewport, this rectangle, and then this is another viewport. And I can have as many viewports as I want in a single sheet of paper. And this is what this is. Essentially a single sheet of paper. This is the page, the layout section, not the model section, but rather where the page paper space resides. So how do you log a viewport? Well, we see that, I guess before we log one, we want to understand what it means, log a viewport. And we see that there's this viewport log slash unlock. So once I unlock the viewport, I am able to, oh, sorry. If I double click inside a viewport, I'll be able to access, or I guess move around that viewport. Versus if I click out of that viewport, and this is double click, it's not a single click. If I double click within a viewport, I'll be able to move around, set it accordingly within my paper space to what I want to show in the eventual drawing, in the eventual output, sorry, as a PDF or whatever you want to save it as. And then once I'm done, I can double click anywhere outside and it'll exit that mode for me. But the locking and unlocking thing that I was showing was that once you have selected on a specific format, so for example, with this, you are happy with the format that is being shown right now. let's say we set it as 1:10. You are happy with the scale. What you can do is you can lock it up. So what locking up allows you to do is, even though if you see how I'm double clicked into this viewport, I'm zooming in, I'm moving around, but it's not allowing me to do any of that. And this is very useful, where once we have locked something in, especially once we have used this annotation scale, the text might change. If you accidentally zoom in, if you accidentally zoom out, you accidentally move around, it will mess up your, um, I guess the space that you've chosen to output, and then you'll have to kind of realign things again. So once everything is aligned, once you are satisfied with your viewport, you can go ahead and lock it up, so that no one else, including yourself, is allowed to change it until unless you intentionally want to do that. Freezing viewport layers and drawings. Um, you can go ahead and freeze a specific layer within a viewport, and it'll only be applicable for the certain viewport. You can do that by going over here and freezing them up. Or actually, a better way would probably be to open up. Oh, sorry, layers. Oh, sorry. To go to this home panel and open up the explorers. The EXP. Oh, sorry, I was typing it the other way around. But opening this up and then right clicking and then viewport freeze in all viewports except current in all viewports. Um, you know, it yeah, depending on your case, you can use this. Annotative dimensions or annotative text in general, it's not specific to dimensions, but it can be used for anything in a sense. So over here, we see that this is 0.25. What if we change it to 1:2? Okay, let's focus on this piece of text. If we change it to 1:4, we see that this annotative text portion actually gets resized versus all this other text that is there, this hello and testing 2, 3, whatever, doesn't get resized. And if I even go into like an insanely small scale, it will still be the same relative to what I had initially selected it as, or what I had initially written it down as. And that's the beauty of this annotation scales, where there are a few of these settings over here. So there is this annotation visibility on off, as well as this automatic annotation on and off. So we see that this is an annotated text. This is visible from this annotated field over here under this text panel in the settings, and we see that there's different scales that are present for this annotation. You can either manually add it, or if you have turned on automatic annotation, whenever you select a different scale, let's say I select 1:100, it will automatically add it to this piece of text. So now, okay, let's say 1:50 is not present over here. If I go ahead and select 1:50, the text gets resized and that scale gets added in only. So you may want to, be careful having this enabled because it will apply to each and every one of your annotation text. So be careful when you are using this automatic annotation. I generally keep it off and then manually set a certain scale for a certain text, but it all depends on the scale that you're putting. Annotation visibility. What that means is if I do something like 10:1, oh, sorry, let me turn this on. Turn this off. Yeah, if I turn this, I need to go 1. So we see that this is not getting impacted anymore, and that is because that scale that we are working on doesn't exist. So it just switches to the default 1:1, whatever it was there by default, rather than using the specific scale. And that is because we haven't enabled automatic annotation. So it doesn't automatically add this newer scaling into its consideration. If I had this visibility as off, what it would do is if I'm doing 4:1, the text is going to disappear completely because that annotation scale is not supported. It's not automatically added because automatic annotation is off, and this is also disabled. So it's not, the text will be hidden. So yeah, depends on your use case, how you want it to be structured as. Annotative, you can enable or disable for dimensions, for text, and for multi-leaders as well. So yeah, probably for a few other ones as well, we saw that even within tables, there was the option of making text annotative. Even within multi-leaders, I believe there was the option of making text annotative. So yeah, it's a nifty tool to keep the size of your text something that is readable. Like right now, the only text that is readable within this entire paper space is this annotative text. All of this is all, unless I zoom in and then set it appropriately like this, it's all completely useless. Versus if I go ahead and make this into 1:20 or whatever, the size of the text will always be the same. And you can see that clearly, like that difference being clearly visible in this top place and in this bottom viewport, where the scale over here is 1:20 and the scale over here is 1:10, but the size of the text remains the same. The size of the annotated text remains the same. So let's get back to the slides and quickly finish over with our final topic for the day, which is publishing and exporting drawings. So in order to publish or export a drawing, ideally what you should do is you should create a block, and I've done that over here. Where you see this block that is created, I've set its dimensions appropriately so that the width and the height are according to the paper space that I'm interested in. So if you see over here in this layout 3, it will very much, very well matches the dimensions of the paper that is underneath, that it's sitting on. And there is this attribute that I've put in as well. You may want to have something like that, you may not. Um, if you don't, you're probably gonna have a few more vertical lines to create a few more boxes where a person can type it out themselves or type it out in a PDF to give any particular give any particulars of whatever drawing you've come up with. But the idea is that if you're working in an organization, you should have a generic block structure that you always use for your drawings. And that's what I've tried somewhat showing that you have this generic block. And this is what you apply to each and every one of your drawings. And then not just this block, but also a page setup, where a page setup gives you a few things like the scale that you're working on, the plot area, the orientation of your drawing, the size of the paper. All of these are, they should be the same for all of the people working within your project, within your team, within your organization. So this is what I'm showing you right now. Where if you open up, where if you look at this block, or if you open up the page setup, note that the block and the page setup are a bit different. The block is something that needs to be added in, every time you create a new page. But the page setup is more about everything that is surrounding. Let's say if you want to print something, anything that is surrounding that printing. So, or save as PDF. You know, if we click on this modify pane over here, you can of course select a custom DWG to PDF file format, or I can select one of the printers that I have over here, and then I can specify the scale that I want to work at, the print area. So there are different settings that I can select, and it'll don't need to play around with that. But there are different settings and the areas that I can select over here. There are different print styles that I can select. So probably grayscale or monochrome is the one that I'll end up using. Print scale allows me to fit to the paper rather than um, have this extra space that might be there if I enforce my custom units rather than what it just for by default. And then there is this offset as well. And you can change that, you can center it on the page. So there's a few of these options that are presented to you, and then you can save them. And you can, of course, add import once you have an option saved, where you can import it from some other, yeah, import it from some other um, drawing. And this is what you would be doing if you are in a larger organization and there is a structured approach to these things. This is what sort of the approach that you would be taking. Lastly, to actually output these things, once you are done with the page setup, go into this output pane over here, and we see all of these output file formats. So you have those basic save commands and whatever over here, but then there is this, of course, PDF out, and it's very simple. You specify the file name and you can save the file. There's a few of these page setup managers also actually present over here. So rather than typing it out in the as a command in the dynamic input, you can type it out. You can open it up over here as well, and you can even publish or print drawings using this setting. So all of these exporting tools are there for you. There are exporting tools that are present over here for you as well. So these are the same as what offered in this section. And yeah, you can export to, I mean, there's a lot of these, and you can download ForumCAD and try to draw something and then try exporting it out uh, from a TWG to a different format and then seeing how that format actually looks like within whatever tool that you're using. So if it's a you can import it as a, sorry, not import, you can export it as maybe a step file or an STL file, or there's a lot of formats, and depending on usability, most would just go for a PDF, but you can actually come up with 2D and 3D drawings using ForumCAD. And then if we go into this panel over here, you have this whole draw 3D section where you can draw 3D items, and then eventually once you're done, output them in an appropriate format, and open it up in a different piece of software and see where it takes you. So I believe that is it for both the sessions and both parts in both the sessions. So this is the end of our 4-part course for MCAD. If you have any questions, if you have any concerns, you can go ahead, leave them in the chat. You can drop us an email. You can reach out to our support email. I will mention that in the chat. Thank you. And yeah, you can always contact me if you have any more questions. And yes, we'll be uploading these videos soon, probably. So do look out for that on our YouTube channel. Do follow it as well. if you, as well as yeah, give it a subscribe, follow it. We're probably gonna be posting more videos on 4MCAD. Uh, and since we've done a few of these lessons now, we're trying to, yeah, we'll be posting a bit more on 4MCAD. So um do give our YouTube page a follow. Thank you. I'll stick around for a few minutes if any of you have any questions. I'll just thank you for attending and listening to me. Thank you.